We're glad you're here tonight. And we are excited that you're joining us online. We are talking, it's a reform night, so we are looking at social justice issues and lots of education about things that are going on in our world that we should be educated on. So tonight, Brian is going to be talking to us about the myths and facts about cash bail, which will be really important coming up during election season. We also have we've got some lot of things happening. Next week we have some visitor speaker coming in to talk about This Girl's Story, which is an organization promoting the rights of young girls. Good Friday is the Friday after that, and usually it's our celebrate week, but we've done a lot of celebrating with our 2-year anniversary and Outspoken, so it is just going to be a regular service here. Check online for details on that because we're still kind of finalizing it. A little bit different with all of people doing different Good Friday services. So check online for that service. After that is a support night. We're talking about the importance of estate planning and getting things situated for when you're older. So you have all your ducks in a row, if you will. Then after that is Explore night again. We're back to Explore, and we will be looking at the Tanakh and Genesis and kind of comparing them and learning about the differences between them and seeing if what we know is what we always.
What's the Tanakh?
It's Jewish Old Testament. And then back to Reform on April 19th, where we're looking at we're going to be watching parts of 13. Which is a history of racial inequality in the U.S. So we have a lot of great things coming up. And as always, if you are able and would like to, there is a place to donate to what we're doing on our website. I am going to lead us in a quick prayer for our focus because we've got a lot of things happening in this church space tonight, and it is bouncing. The club is jumping. It's upstairs. That's what it is. Upstairs, they are doing martial arts. So that is why it sounds like people are doing martial arts there. That's okay. It's not going to stop us. So let's pray. God, thank you for bringing us here today. Thank you for the beautiful weather that makes it so much easier to come together. Thank you for all of our ideas and our curiosities that bring us together and help us get excited about creating a world that is what you would have. A perfect scenario with full justice and equality for everyone. We pray that you are able to help us focus and to keep our minds open and help us think of questions that we can ask you to dig further. We ask that you are with the people who aren't with us tonight. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, Brian, come on up. You're the next contestant.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So this is, as I said, Reform Night. We're going to talk about the myth, the facts, about cash bail. And it's particularly pertinent in an election year. If you, and of course, we always, particularly on Reform Night, we often get into political topics, and we'd love to have those discussions. We're never going to tell you how we think you should vote or what you think you should do, but we're going to talk about issues that might be relevant in the elections. And so cash bail is something you may have heard about during the last election. It was something that was being talked about quite a bit leading up to the changes that were going to be made. And I imagine it's something you're going to be hearing about again coming up toward the November election as to what actually has happened now that they've had these changes about cash bail. And so we wanted to talk about kind of what's true and what's not, and what you need to know about cash bail to be kind of informed and think about different ways to approach it. And so I'm curious, how many heard about there being an issue with cash bail in Illinois and the law was changed? Okay, so most folks here online, I don't know if you heard, but so there was a lot that was in the news, and I've got a few clips here, and I'll apologize in advance for the online folks. I'm not exactly sure how these will play, one better or the other, but at least for the folks in the room, we'll see some clips about how this was being covered.
A crime surge after the state Supreme Court eliminated cash bail. Kyle Bacon is the sheriff of Franklin County, Illinois. He joins me now. Sheriff, what does this look like? The immediate release of criminals, is that what this move looks like?
Well, I wouldn't go so far to say that. It's a wholesale change for the way that we've done business for many years. We are concerned, as well as 100 prosecutors in our state and 90 to 95 sheriffs out of 102 agree that there are serious concerns for our victims. But we are concerned.
So you arrest somebody, and you don't know whether they're going to be in custody or released immediately. You simply don't know.
Yeah, my concern has never been necessarily the elimination of cash bail. I understand the issues with that. We have two people charged with the same offense. One of those persons is a millionaire. The other one has no money. One posts bond and walks out. The other one remains in jail. What does that have to do with public safety? I understand the argument. I am concerned, though, that the people that need to be detained in jail will not fall within the detention net set up through this legislation, and I'm concerned about the safety of the public in our community.
Where's this coming from? The governor of Illinois is a multi-billionaire. Does he have any idea what it's like on the streets?
Well, I don't know about that. I know that the county and the people that I serve, we live 300 miles south of Chicago. We are rural communities. When crime occurs here, it's news and everyone knows it. And we don't disappear into the masses when people are released from jail. And I'm concerned that these folks that we release per the Safety Act that are going to reoffend quickly within our community.
Sheriff Bacon, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Got it right.
Thank you.
So there's a lot that we could unpack there, and we won't go through. I got a few different videos we won't go through, but I think it was kind of interesting. He actually, I don't think he necessarily meant to, but he actually laid out several of the very good explanations for cash bail. And then he went on to say, well, we live in a rural community where we know everybody, and basically laid out exactly why he doesn't need cash bail in this community. So, I think you could probably draw some conclusions about some of the stereotypes that he has that causes him to worry about cash bail in the big scary city. So we see news covered in that fashion, and then also there was some instances where things were covered in a more comical sort of way.
Let's go and do that thing. You do whatever you like. Well, we can't condone anything of the sort.
No, we can't. Lay up.
So if you couldn't quite see that, I know it's kind of small. Basically, what you've got is she's representing the other 49 states saying, oh, we can't condone that.
Obviously, don't go and do that thing.
You do whatever you like.
Well, we can't condone anything of the sort.
No, we can't. Lay up.
Yeah, so this notion that, okay, well, now that we've gotten rid of cash bail, everybody can just go do whatever they want, right? Which I'm sure we've all seen ever since the cash bail was eliminated. It's just been a free-for-all. And then this next one, I will just give a warning. This next one is an ad that was put out, a political ad. It's got some intense images. They only last for a couple seconds. But that's something that's going to alarm you. You might want to look away just for a moment here. But this is some of the kind of the fear mongering that was being done around the politics of this. The age restricted. That's how you know it's people let me go there.
If you click watch on YouTube, it should be okay, but then you have to go back to your comment.
I know, it's not too bad. Right, one more thing. I'm going to stay over here. All right, well, we'll skip it. But suffice to say, it's a big scary video with lots of footage of people, being attacked in their cars, people being shot, various just instances of crime, and saying the key phrase that they use is, "Do you want the crime of Chicago being brought to your city, to your suburbs?" And then they vote a certain way to avoid that problem. All right, now I'm on everything. Oh, there it is. All right. We're moving on. All right. So when we talk about eliminating cash bail, what we're actually talking about is the Safety Act. I'm sure that's an acronym for something. I frankly don't know what. But it was originally passed back in 2021, and as I'll touch on here in a minute, it actually does a lot of things that go beyond just cash bail. The cash bail was what got the most attention. It was immediately challenged in the courts and went all the way up to the Illinois Supreme Court. It was upheld as constitutional by the Illinois Supreme Court in January of 2023, and it actually went into effect on September 18th of 2023. So what's that? Just 6 months or so ago. Now, what does it actually do? Obviously, the big ticket item that we're talking about tonight, it eliminated cash bail. What does that mean? Well, historically speaking, right, it either, if you know this from, life experience, or if you know this from watching on TV, somebody gets arrested and then they go before a judge and the judge says, I'm going to set your bail at $7,500. And hit the gavel and they take them away, right? And that means that in order to get out of jail, that person, in order to get out of jail while they're awaiting trial, that person has to put up either the full cash amount, or depending on where it is, usually a bond, which is like 10% of the amount, but still can be a significant amount depending on what the bail is set up by the judge. And obviously that creates significant problems if you are a lower income individual. If you are someone who's more privileged, you might say, okay, well, $7,500, sure, I'll just put that on my, write a check, put it on a card, whatever, and then we'll deal with that later. And now you're out and free to carry on about your life while you wait whatever those charges are. But if you don't have the money for that, you sit in jail while you wait for your charges. Even if you're ultimately found to be not guilty, you're still going to sit in jail and wait. And so we'll talk a bit more about the consequences of that. But when we say elimination of cash bail, what we mean is now we have a pretrial release program. And in Illinois, that means the pretrial release is only denied if the judge determines that the defendant poses a specific, real, and present threat to a person, or has a highly likelihood of flight. So unless the judge thinks the person being charged with the crime is going to hurt someone or they're going to run away, the default setting now is that they're going to be released to come back for their trial. Obviously, it's a significant difference. Now, the other thing, just while we're here on the Safety Act, there's a lot of other things going on. There's additional pretrial reforms and resources. There's policing reforms. There's prison and sentencing reforms. And there's also crime victims compensation. So there's a lot of things going on within the Safety Act that we won't get into tonight. I think based on my reading of it, a lot of it sounds positive. Some of it I actually have some concerns about, and it's one of those things that anytime legislation is getting passed, right, people put in their own pet projects and their own amendments, and there's some good with some bad. But, obviously, probably goes without saying, my stance is that, I think that the elimination of cash bail is good. So, now why does it matter, right? Well, we started talking about this a little bit, but there's really 5 big areas where cash bail creates significant problems in the community and inequities, right? First of all, cash bail threatens the health of those arrested, their families, and their communities. So pretrial incarceration, which often results from the inability to pay cash bail, is really an immediate threat to the health and physical safety of those who are incarcerated. Death by suicide is the leading cause of deaths in jails, and people detained pretrial are 6 times more likely to die by suicide than people who have been convicted and sentenced. So there's a very significant risk of folks dying by suicide while they're waiting for trial. We're not even talking about people who have been convicted of a crime. The kind of the most high-profile example of this that you may have heard of, and if you haven't, I'd suggest looking. I mean, it's a very sad story, but it's one worth knowing. Is Khalif Browder in New York City, who was 16 years old. He spent 3 years on Rikers Island awaiting trial. 2 of those he was in solitary confinement after being arrested for allegedly stealing a backpack. He, ultimately died by suicide and never even went to trial. So he spent the final years of his life, kind of going through the hell of being on Rikers Island, without ever being convicted anyway. The other thing, as we talk about the health and safety, is that 1 in 30 people in jail report experiencing sexual assault while incarcerated. So, when we're talking about putting people into this environment, again, not based on any sort of conviction, but just based on their inability to pay, we're really putting people's health and safety at risk. Another significant issue that is a problem is that cash bail and pretrial incarceration drain valuable economic resources for families and communities. So if you put yourself in the position of someone who's just been arrested for what may be a fairly minor offense, and let's say that they're a person who is already struggling financially, is already kind of living paycheck to paycheck, or maybe even not paycheck to paycheck, right? They're struggling to make ends meet, and now all of a sudden they have to come up with money just to stay out of jail while they await trial. And obviously that can become cyclical, right? You pay that cash bail, it disrupts the economic stability, and economic instability is a known cause of increasing the risk of crime and violence. So the crime happens, then you get arrested, then you owe money, and it just cycles through. Another factor is the cash bail disrupts current employment and creates barriers to future employment, right? So, obviously, one of the key factors, for kind of helping people out is to stay employed. When people are unable to afford cash bail and remain incarcerated until they get a trial date, their ability to maintain employment is at risk, right? If they're not able to get out and go back to their job, they're not only going to spend that time in jail, but also probably lose the job that they had when they're out. And then many people who cannot afford to pay cash bail often end up taking plea deals to avoid staying in pretrial detention so they can get back out and work. So you've got people who are pleading guilty to crimes they didn't commit because they can't afford to pay the bail to get out, and then just so they can go back out and make more money. So that's obviously a significant problem. Also, cash bail results in family separation and has adverse effects on children. Again, you have a situation where it can be a parent or a single parent or a guardian, whoever the case may be, gets arrested again. We're not talking about for regardless of the offense, it doesn't really matter. Once you're taking that guardian out of the home, now someone needs to care for those children. And if they don't have the money for the cash bail, now those children are going into the system when they might not have otherwise, and obviously that's a negative effect on children. The statistics say that 53% of men and 66% of women who are incarcerated for an inability to pay bail were parents of minor children. So the majority of people who are in jail waiting trial because they can't pay their bail have children at home and someone else is needing to take care of. And finally, cash bail perpetuates the cycles of homelessness and incarceration. The cash bail systems create new barriers to maintaining and obtaining housing upon release, and it disconnects people from the opportunities. Not only are we talking about lost financial opportunities, but also, the resources they may have had, the connections they may have had. You may have had a spot lined up, but now you've been in jail for 3 months and that opportunity is no longer there. So, these are all significant real consequences that are happening because people are being, put into these jail situations simply because they can't pay bail. Again, not with any sort of conviction. So I'm going to go to, we've got another video, and this one's a little happier. Or not, well, maybe rephrase that. not a happier video, but it's a more reasonable representation of what's happening.
I was incarcerated pre-trial for 2 months.
2 months. 3 months.
1.5 years.
Simply because I couldn't afford to pay $1,500.
$5,000.
$7,500.
$25,000.
I lost my home.
I nearly lost my son.
I lost my business.
I almost took a plea that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Not because of a conviction,
but because of an accusation.
Our stories are unfortunately not unique.
They're all too normal.
Every year, more than 250,000 people pass through Illinois' jail.
250,000 people.
But we can stop this injustice today.
The Pretrial Fairness Act will end money bail in Illinois.
The Pretrial Fairness Act will restore the presumption of innocence.
The Pretrial Fairness Act will allow hundreds of thousands of people per year to stay in their communities,
working,
taking care of their families,
and accessing services while awaiting trial.
Let's end money bail.
Let's end money bail.
Let's end money bail.
Let's end money bail.
And bring our people home.
Across Illinois.
So you can really see, the two sides, right? We saw people on Fox News saying like, "Aren't you worried that all these murderers are going to get back out on the streets and go commit all these crimes?" And then you see the people who are really affected. These are the people who have been stuck in jail for months, if not years, because they can't pay the bail to get out of jail, and how it actually affects their lives. And so one of the things I wanted to do as we talked about this, and just as you encounter people in the community, kind of going back to Leslie's talk a few weeks ago about talking across the void, is I think it's helpful to be able to reframe these conversations, right? Because the people who are going to put out the fear mongering ads and Fox News segments, they need to be reminded that, well, we're talking about real people, right? You're not going to convince them that like, oh no, it's totally cool that like violent criminals are on the loose, because that's not, that nobody's going to think that's a great idea, but also that's not what's really happening. And so you need to reframe it in terms of like, here's, what would you do if you were in this situation, and kind of look at that. So I want to talk through now some of the myths and facts of, what people say about cash bail, and then what the reality is. And the other thing to know about this is, as we head into the next election cycle, we're going to start to see stuff like this, because the good news is that video has a happy ending where they're saying, let's end cash bail, and we did, right? It's gone in Illinois. It has been since September. But now we're going to see this next election cycle, a whole new set of fear mongering, not talking about here's what's going to happen if we end cash bail. They're going to say, well, cash bail ended, and look how terrible everything is, right? So this is where it's helpful to know, like, here's what's true and here's not. So one of the myths, and this one is easy enough because we know what happened, but the idea was that on January 1st, when this goes into effect, the jails are going to be emptied out with people charged with murder who are being held on money bonds, right? Just everyone who's been arrested for murder is just going to get out of jail free right away. The reality, of course, is that this didn't happen. Why? Well, because prosecutors have the ability under the law to petition for people charged with murder and other violent crimes to be jailed pre-trial. And, knowing that this was coming, the prosecutors, the sheriff's departments, the court system, they all had plans in place to set everyone who was currently in on pretrial detention on bail. They set them for hearings. I think it was within 60 days. After the new law went into effect, to say, okay, should this person still be in? Should they not? And so, again, it's really just a bunch of fear mongering. There was never going to be a scenario where the people in jail were like, I don't know, we just got to let all these people go. Not our call. Yeah, and that's not what happened. It was never going to be what happened. Right? Next, it says the SAFE-T Act creates non-detainable offenses, including second-degree murder, burglary, aggravated battery, and other violent charges. Okay, so this is a great example of picking words out of the law and making it seem like something is happening that's not. The reality is that the Safety Act outlines the types of offenses for which someone can be detained pre-trial, which includes forcible felonies such as first-degree murder and sexual assault, in which prison sentence is required if someone is convicted. Many of the Act's detractors have used this to suggest that the crime that isn't anything that's not explicitly outlined there, including second-degree murder, arson, and burglary, are all non-detainable offenses. That's not true. That there is still discretion for the courts. People accused of those charges can still be held pre-trial if a judge determines that they are a flight risk, or if they are in violation of their parole, or if they are already on pre-trial release from another charge. The focus on second-degree murder is particularly misleading, and if my adults-only video had worked, you would have seen that one of the things that second-degree murder was one of the things they called out. They put up on the screen in big red letters like second-degree murder. They're counting on people not really knowing a lot about how that part of the legal system works, because prosecutors rarely charge anyone with second-degree murder unless it's tagged on with other charges that are also going to carry with it a pretrial detention requirement. In fact, the data shows that there are only 212 cases in Cook County over an 18-year period that were just second-degree murder charges. So again, this is like picking out something that is a theoretical problem and then saying, oh no, we're all in danger, when the reality is this isn't a thing that happens. Typically when you see a second-degree murder charge, it's tied to a weapons charge or something else like that that's already going to carry with it. In the same time period, by the way, there were almost 7,000 first-degree murder charges. So again, they're really picking at details and saying, oh no, aren't we all worried about all the second-degree murderers? Which is not really a thing. All right. The Safety Act prohibits police officers from arresting someone for trespassing. I'm sure you've heard things like this. And this isn't just in Illinois, but it's kind of become a big talking point nationwide that, oh, well, now you can just go in and trespass places, or now you can do shoplifting and other petty offenses, and you can't even get in trouble. And so everything's just, the police have given up. What the Safety Act requires is that police officers are to ticket people accused of low-level offenses, including criminal trespass to property, unless they pose an obvious threat to themselves or the community. So that means police officers do still have some discretion to arrest someone if they determine they're a threat to public safety. So what does that mean? Well, that means that, if you're a teenager and you hop over a fence and you're somewhere you shouldn't be, you're going to get ticketed for trespassing. But unless there's some reason that you seem threatening, they're going to let you go. And that part is true, right? But if on the flip side, someone busts into your store and is threatening people, that part of trespassing, you're going to get more than ticketed. You also probably get charged for more trespassing. But so again, it's this idea that we're going to trump up from the phrase, things to be afraid of that aren't real issues, and then find them in the law and say, oh, look, all the criminals are going to come for us. They're all going to come trespass without getting in trouble. Finally, anyone seen the Purge movies? Okay, well, I guess I'm the only one who's seen the Purge movies. This is the concept is that one day a year for 12 hours all crime is legal. That's what the Safety Act is doing. We're going to usher in a purge era where criminals will roam free and police can't do anything to stop them, which is obviously not what's happened. It's obviously never what was going to happen. And looking outside right now, it doesn't seem like the purge out there. So I think we've made it. The Safety Act obviously does not stop police from arresting people, but it does require police officers to provide aid after using force. Hey, there's an idea. and requires officers to intervene if other officers use unauthorized or excessive force. Hey, there's another good idea, right? So, what it's really all about is, as I see it, the fundamental aspect of the Safety Act is humanity, right? We're trying to recognize everyone's humanity and put people in the best position to succeed, even if they've made a mistake, and to be clear, even if they've allegedly made a mistake, right? Because we don't even know when we're talking about pretrial detention whether someone has actually committed a crime. And it's certainly not at all beyond the realm of possibility that sometimes our law enforcement makes mistakes. So, it's all about humanity, and what these myths are designed to do is to kind of claw back that humanity. You're like, no, you're trying to make it humane for everybody, but we gotta come out and say, oh no, these are the people who are going to carry out the purge, so we can't have that. We can't have these people. And it's interesting because a lot of times, and this is where I'll do a bit of church for our church. A lot of times the people who are pushing these myths are the ones who would be the first to tell you that they're Christians, that they're going to hold themselves out as godly people, and they live by the Bible and everything like that. Well, what we've seen not just in Illinois but also around the country is a lot of Christian groups putting a lot of support behind the efforts to end cash bail. Kentucky has a very large Christian presence pushing for the end of cash bail there. There's been a lot of efforts in Texas. The Presbyterian Church, props to them, they've put a lot of efforts into ending cash bail nationwide. And what they have found, and it's one of those things that it's never surprising when you dig into it, is that when you really stop to think about, well, what do we stand for as a Christian community, and which side of this issue should we be on? And what they find is that ending cash bail is where we should be. These are some quotes from some of those organizations who talk about there being a biblical mandate to care for the poor and provide for the poor with justice, right? And cash bail is not serving that purpose. And this is to have extended detention on a defendant's empty pocketbook fails as a matter of compassion, of common sense, of public purpose, and of basic morality. And for those who do look to the Bible as their guidebook, you can go into the text and find there are plenty of examples where the Bible talks about caring for the needy, caring for those who are in prison, caring for those who are captive, not casting them out, not treating them as second-class citizens, but recognizing their humanity and standing up for justice in those areas. We've got Psalms that says the Lord hears the needy and does not despise his captive people. We've got Luke where it says he has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free. And in Hebrews it says, continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourselves were suffering. I think that last one is really a great concept just for all of us to internalize, not just for the concept of cash bail, but just lots of concepts in general. Is how would you approach this? If you were living your life like you were in prison with the prisoners, how would that change your perspective? How would it change your perspective if you were being mistreated alongside those who were suffering? There's a lot of different areas in our society and our world right now that applies to. And I can speak as a white cisgendered male. I know that I have the privilege of not being mistreated nearly as much as many of my brothers and sisters. So that's one of the things that I try, and I know probably always fall short of, but try to put myself in those shoes and say, how can we stand up and use some of that privilege to speak on and to stand up on issues for those who are suffering. So to that end, what comes next, right? Because we've got the good news, the cash bail has been abolished in Illinois. Two things. One, and we've talked about how we're going to, how you respond to the myths and that you're going to hear come election season. One thing to know is obviously you can expect if there's a change in the political environment, there may be an effort to roll back and return us to cash bail. So that's always just something to look out for. But there's other initiatives and the same groups of people are working on. So things to keep an eye out for. One is stemming the tide of electronic monitoring. This is perhaps not surprisingly, as always seems to be the case, whenever there's a step forward for justice, then somebody comes up with another idea that's like, what if we just did this instead? And so what we've seen is a huge ramp up in electronic monitoring to say, okay, well, we're going to let you out, but we're still going to keep an eye on you. We're still going to restrict where you can go. We're still going to restrict what you can do. And so there's a strong effort being made right now to stem the tide of electronic monitoring, particularly in Cook County, where it's very much on the rise. The other thing is, of course, monitoring of law enforcement budgets. This is another situation where, again, in response to cash bail, and this is just a specific example, but I'm sure there are others, what did the Cook County Sheriff budget immediately do? They said, we're going to need more resources because there's more criminals on the street. And it's always good to keep an eye on those budgets. One of the things these groups are looking at is how are these budgets expanding services that really should be housed and funded within the health system or community-based organizations, right? Because we see so often in our kind of police-driven society that oftentimes who's responding to someone in a mental health crisis? It's often the police. Is that really who should be? Probably not, right? So these organizations are monitoring the budgets and trying to get in and advocate for, how might we redirect those resources to people who can, help in specific areas. The other one, and I thought this was interesting, as a lawyer myself, limits on virtual hearings. I have to say, I selfishly, over on the civil docket, I really enjoy a good virtual hearing. I wear my shorts with my suit jacket, and nobody knows, and I don't have to go into the courthouse, and it seems like a great deal. But what they have found, and there's lots of data on this, is that remote hearings have been proven to exacerbate the already problematic issues with discrimination in the court system. Judges, tend to, when they see someone on the screen, it doesn't have the same humanity as when the person's sitting there in front of them. And they also, the judge, and I've noticed this again in the civil context, it's easy to see someone on screen and think they're distracted or think they don't care, when that may or may not be true. And so, a judge tends to think that if they look at the screen and they see someone out there who looks disinterested and disengaged, they're going to say, okay, they don't care, why should I? So there's a significant effort underway to try to limit the use of virtual hearings, because this is something that came up during COVID, and then it became a huge convenience and frankly cost savings for the courts, because, well, gosh, if we can just walk the folks in jail down to the video room, as opposed to having to put them in a bus and drive over to the courthouse, that'd be a lot easier. But it's definitely, the statistics are there that it actually makes things much worse. And finally, next up is the Pretrial Fairness Act, right? So this is the tag-along bill that's going to follow on, and this is making its way through the State House right now. It calls for $15 million in appropriations requests that will expand health and human services for people in trial. So this is kind of the next piece is, regardless of whether you are being held for pretrial detention or not, what health and human resources are available to you while you're awaiting trial. So those are the things to keep an eye on as to what's coming next. That's the end of the presentation I have. So with that, for our online audience, thanks for joining, and we're going to close up here, and then for those who are here, we can grab snacks, sort of off the chairs, and we can have discussion.